So another deviation from my normal video pattern. I'm installing some acrylic splashbacks in a commercial kitchen, and it was late-ish at night. Pretty much I was on my own, everybody had gone home, and it was just me and Pete Tong on the radio. So I decided to get the video camera out and give you a run through. So the acrylic splashbacks we've got here, I think they were called Mystic Wood, and they're made by Splashwall. I can't remember if Splashwall sell direct or not. These came via B&Q, I believe. Anyway, unlike normal acrylic, this stuff seemed to cut really nicely. I was a bit dubious at first. I went through the instructions. I'm using a metal blade rather than a wood or a plastic blade, and it cut really nicely. I was unimpressed with it. Quite flexible, but you've got to be aware, if you do get something like this, there is very slight chipping around where you cut. I tried a different couple of blades, and this was the best one, and you do cut upwards. There's details on the Splashwall anyway. I think they're on their website, or a leaflet came with it, I can't remember now. I've either cut with the side that you can see upwards. I found there is a dimension for a tip of blade for drilling, but I used an old technique I used to use years ago, just using a bluntish drill that tends to burn its way through, but no chance of grabbing and snatching and cracking. So I've mentioned before, dyslexia and dyscalculia, my worst nightmares. So whenever I measure anything, I have a habit of, especially these kind of distances, measure it in metric and put down an approximate inches as well. I've always got some reference. And another thing I do is turn the page over and then do it all again, and then check the two measurements. If they don't match up, turn another page, do it again. In this case, it's always far better to measure 3 or 4 times to make sure you've got it right, because you bugger up one of these splashbacks. I think they were, I don't know how much, hundreds of pounds they were each, but definitely. And here you can see that I've put the approximate distances in inches. Masking tape where I want to mark up, and I'll fast forward this in a section because it's obviously going to get laborious otherwise, but mask up where I'm going to be marking it in pencil, just so I can get a clear line, because you couldn't really see any marks on the top of the plastic protection film. So, and another thing is, whenever you're doing marks on anything, no matter what it is, don't use a Sharpie, especially on paintwork or anything that's going to be painted, because you'll have a nightmare trying to get rid of it, and you'll probably end up having to use a sealant paint to cover over it. Even if that would do it, I'm not so sure it would. But always use a pencil. Anyway, I'm going to fast forward this. Basically, it's just measuring up. So I use a square just to set my sides, and the first socket was a couple of mil higher, so that one I did individually, and the others I just mark off and do with a straight edge. So here I'm just marking up the centre post between the two sockets. Basically I wanted to make sure that I didn't cut the leg out, so I identified the either end of the socket and the centre portion. I would advise you do it some way or other, whether you mark the bit you're cutting out or the bit you don't want to cut out, whichever way, just make sure you don't cut in between two sockets if you're doing this kind of bit and piece. So like I said, a bluntish drill bit. It's still drilling, but it has a habit of chewing its way through. But I've used this technique before on acrylic, and the advantage is that it won't grab or bite. Very gently just remove any burrs. I say very gently because you do not want to be scratching the acrylic. Once you've got your two holes, then you can cut from each corner. I found that the corners were actually quite gentle on this. Say I was using a metal blade, which is not ideal for cornering, but it cut the acrylic the best, and it was by far and away better than the others. So like I say, start in a corner, hole, work down, turn it round, nibble out the corner, up to the other edge, then start from the other hole. I had a habit of cutting the last little bit of corner out, and make sure that everything's clean between strokes. Really, you don't want to be pushing the jigsaw along on top of hard plastic chips, just in case they do scratch. So every time I lifted the saw out, I'd brush the saw off and brush the acrylic off as well. There you go, I was just taking out that corner, just didn't want it fracturing or flying around, so it was easier to cut it out, gone then. Just a note as well is don't remove the jigsaw while it's running. Something's going to get damaged one way or other, be it you, the blade, the jigsaw, or the part you're cutting. So just let it come to a standstill before you pull it out of the cut.
On here with my monthly dance show for August, with the summer festival still going strong. Massive weekend, of course, right now. 3 events with huge dance lineups close out the month. As we continue with a track that Jax Jones made his hottest record when he took over last Friday's dance party. Second City are back.
Now I'm applying an adhesive. This one was general purpose, but it included acrylics and plastics, and there is a listing for specific stuff they use on the Splashwall website, I think, but to be honest, I had a quick read up and this stuff seemed to be doing just as good a job. Very similar sort of stuff. Can't remember what make it was now, whether you might be able to see on the tube or not, but anyway, applied 10 metre, or should I say 10 centimetre apart roughly. I wasn't paying too much attention, I didn't measure it, I just slapped it on there. And I also went round individual sockets as well, just to make sure that there was no movement in them. Now lifting it up and sticking it on, that's literally simple. Under each end I've got a small wedge, purely and simply that when I seal it with silicone around the edges, I could get underneath to get as much of a seal as possible. So I've just got little plastic tags just taped in place at either end, just to lift it off the counter, just in that whisker. Other than that, it's just simply pressing it on and trying to make sure that it is straight with the wall. You'll see me just eyeing it up down the length of it, but to be honest with you, you could just use a piece of straight wood or a straight edge just to push against it, just to make sure it's all flat, but I had a pretty good surface to start with, so nice and easy and simple. In the corners you have to leave an expansion gap, and there's a white trim which goes in the corner. A bit unsightly personally. I wish they'd done a grey trim or something that fitted in a little bit better, but that's what you have to put in there to allow for an expansion of the acrylic. And also a note, they're not ideal for cooking in front of, so hot surfaces. So with that, this is the finished kitchen. This was a few days later. There was a bit of a deadline going on, so although the electrics weren't quite finished, I'd cleared out and moved on to other bits. And you can see the white strips in the corner for the expansion gap. And so they don't look great, do they? And this was a couple of days after that. I'd done the lights, which was I think the last video that I did actually, so I'd recorded this before that one. And there was a wedding cake being started. Anyway, hope this is useful. See you again soon. Ta-ra.